what's going on, guys? In this video, we're going to be checking out the brand new NECA Toys Alien Covenant. This is the Xenomorph. Much like the Neomorph that we already had a look at in the previous video, I've currently got the Xenomorph standing on one of these display stands just to help him stand upright. We'll take the measurements though from the top of the base to, let's say, the top of the tubing on its torso. It would be 10 inches tall, about 9.5 inches tall. If you subtract that and only look to about the top of its dome, then the Xenomorph is closer actually to about 9 inches, about 8.5 inches to 9 inches. We'll go ahead and take it off the display stand. And luckily it does have peg holes on the undersides of both of its feet. So if you do have a couple of these little stands kicking around somewhere, I would definitely say make use of them. Because as good as these figures are, of course one of the problems sometimes that they face is the difficulty to stand. I absolutely adore this figure. This is such a great representation of the Xenomorph. Now, of course, we've gotten loads and loads of Xenomorphs over the course of time from the folks over at NECA. Varying degrees, some of them do change. They're not, of course, the same consistent mold. But I might say that this is one of my personal favorites. In recent memory, of course, having picked up as many Xenomorphs as I have, of course, there's things that you look forward to. Some of them, of course, things you expect to see on a Xenomorph. And then every once in a while, you'll be surprised with some of the things that they add and tweak to the figure. In this case, I think it's got a lot of the great elements that I've liked so much about the NECA releases. And I think it's now kind of just upgraded it to a really nice presentation here. This, for me, competes really with anything that would be a higher end, more expensive collectible, whether it be a statue, a six scale figure. I think really both the paint and the sculpt of this Xenomorph absolutely shine. Now, I do notice though that the particular build torso area here is a little broader than some of the later or earlier released Xenomorphs. Definitely has a much more broader skeletal frame than some of the other Xenomorphs that came across a little bit more lanky. It's got a very squared off torso, which is maybe perhaps some of the differencing between this one and some of the earlier release figures that we've seen in the past. Making use of the same translucent smoked dome, to which you can see the skeletal interior, which looks quite good. And I like the transitioning of airbrushing, where it's a little bit more clear on the front, and it gets progressively a little bit more smokier on the top here. Of course, you've got your mouth, and much like every other Xenomorph, you've got the interior mouth as well, which again looks really good. The coloring here is something that is quite hard to describe unless you physically have it in hand, and I can only hope that through the process of these videos, you can hopefully gauge the actual coloring fairly well. The coloring is actually closer to kind of like browns and beiges, which on paper should sound conflicting for what you would want with a Xenomorph, and yet surprisingly works extremely well when you've got it on top of this fantastic sculpt. In fact, a lot of the color tones and the color choices would be closer to something that you would see on like a tree. So like some beiges, again some browns, some dark browns, some grays. Again, shouldn't work on a Xenomorph, and yet surprisingly works so well. You've got the longer fingers, something again. Now this one actually has several different fingers, a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus the thumb, which again has varied amongst the many different designs of the Xenomorph. Some of them having like 2 fingers and a thumb, some of them having varying degrees, varying quantities of fingers. Really again like the skeletal frame here of the hand, where you can see like all the individual bones and tendons and stuff like that. Some nice dark recessed areas of the black. Again, mix that with the beige and the grays and stuff like that. Really showcases quite nicely. This particular Xenomorph as well has considerably longer tubing that comes out, jetting out from the back of its torso. Something that, you know, has, again, varied in sizing and quantities, as some of them have had smaller tubes mixed with the longer tubes. This basically primarily sticks with longer tubes as its design aspects. And you got the tubing that runs around the top from the torso area here. The legs don't come across as lanky as perhaps some original outings as well, favoring a much more upward standing Xenomorph, but again, you can still get those crouched poses via the wondrous double hinged on the knees and the, you know, the ball joint, universal joints in the legs, and of course you've got your ankle pivots and all that kind of goodness there as well. Also love the fact that they still continue to stick with the hinges on the feet. In this case, you've got, well, you got 5 toes making up the footing here of the creature. A good, like, broad foot as well on this particular release. The tail is much more, well, it's tried and true. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And NECA continues to show why don't fixing it definitely does well for their figure line. Incorporating, again, the wireframe in the tail. By this point, it's something that I appreciate so much, but being able to adjust the tail. Not only do you get it for dynamic poses, but in a lot of cases too, if you don't have use of a stand, the tail in some instances, though this one being a little thinner than previous Xenomorphs, a lot of times does give you some extra support struts where you can kind of use the tail to assist in propping the figure upright. For poseability on this guy, I say guy, this is Xenomorph. The head hinges up and down, as well as a rotation left and right. It does get a little on the stuck side because you've got the tubing running on either side of the torso, that moving the head back and forth sometimes can get, well, it butts up against the sides and limits a little bit of that poseability. You've got your universal joints there in the arms, full rotation going on there, a rotation in the forearm area. What appears to be a double hinge on the elbow, a rotation in the hands, as well as back and forth. Rotation all the way around, I should say. You've got the upper torso ball joint. You've got what appears to be universal joints in the thigh, double hinged knee, single hinge on the foot, but allows also for like a slight ankle pivot where you can rotate the feet depending, again, the nature of how you want to display the figure. And as we've already discussed, does also have the hinge on, in this case, the 5 toes, where you can bend the figure for additional stability, or again, if you want a little bit more of a dynamic pose. Still, I would say something that requires a display stand. I mean, even if you can get it into stand properly, you know, the mileage will vary as to how long the figure may stand for before it may potentially topple over. And that's nothing due to the construction of the figure. It's just one of those cases where, because the figure is lanky, it really doesn't give much of a footprint for the figure to properly stand. So display stands, in this case, if you want to pick up like the NECA released display stands, which I think come in like a 10-pack, those come very, very handy, not only displaying, for example, the Xenomorph, but as a comparison too, the recently released and just recently looked at Neomorph, which I should have actually done size comparison right off the bat. But you can see a considerable difference in height and size, overall size, between the Neomorph and the Xenomorph. Good looking figures. Again, like NECA can't do wrong when it comes to Predators, Aliens, and really any movie property tie-ins. They seem to be continuing to be the kings when it comes to toy releases. I would say by far this may very well be my favorite new Xenomorph that I'm going to have in my collection. I would definitely say highly recommended if you guys can definitely find him. The colors are just beautiful on this piece. Incorporating things that I really didn't think was going to work for Xenomorph, it surprisingly works again so very well. Today we were checking out the brand new NECA toys. This was the Alien Covenant, and this was the Xenomorph. If you guys like this video, certainly hit it with a like down below, and make sure you also hit that little bell down below and turn on your notifications so that any future videos that come onto this channel you won't miss out on. Thanks for watching. See you next time.